Hey everybody, welcome back to Human Nature. I'm Jamie Clements.
I'm Loui Blake.
Lou, we have literally just finished chatting to Dr. E.
We have.
And I love that guy. He's a fountain of knowledge. He is just a good bloke. And I think what I feel I probably didn't understand fully about him until I've gotten to know him better over the last year or so. I had him in this box of biohacking, longevity medicine, high tech, high spend end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, I hope, and if you haven't already listened to it, I'd highly encourage people go back and listen to the full episode. But there's this full spectrum, holistic approach to health, functional medicine, lifestyle medicine, basics before biohacks to lay that foundation. And I think that is refreshing to see, actually, because I think we are seeing that shift, as he mentioned as well, towards this more holistic approach where people aren't just going for the hack instead of looking at the full picture. But what were your big takeaways from the episode and the chat with Dr. E?
Yeah, I think the integrative approach is really important, and how traditional Western medicine looks at these, takes a reductionist view of individual systems in the body or individual organs in the body, as opposed to a collective viewpoint. And if you then look beyond that at how, spiritual, psychological, all these different systems interconnect to create a picture of wellness, well-being, right? Which I think is super interesting. I think for this conversation as well, we were going to speak about some of the practices that you and I have personally engaged with that span that multitude of different inputs, right?
Yeah.
So it could be more from a biohacking physical perspective, all the way to a more, let's say, spiritual perspective, right? So what would you say over the course of your journey in this space have been some of the most impactful therapies that you have undertaken? And you can start wherever you want.
I think let's go in the right order, which I think is like basics, habits, practices, like low tech to high tech, I think is probably where I go. Because I do think, I was even thinking during that chat with Dr. E, I was like, peptides I find fascinating. I'll try most things if Dr. E says they're legit. I
never thought I'd find myself injecting myself with multiple things on a daily basis, by the way, but here I am.
And I don't think that's for everybody, right?
Sure.
So I think the low tech is probably the best place to start. What's worked for me, I think, boring answer comes as no surprise to anybody, I'm sure. Breathwork and meditation, stillness, a practice of what I now call and refer to as like pace management. Mm-hmm. So actually looking at the way I live my life, my whole lifestyle of work, training, living, and looking at actually the way in which the world pushes us towards this incredibly intense pace and always being on, and intentionally working against that to actually go, right, I want to achieve, I have ambitions, I have goals, I do want to get things done, but I know from doing it the wrong way that I can burn myself out very quickly if I'm not managing the pace of things. And Jamie Wheel, who we're both big fans of and I've had the pleasure of spending some time with, talks a lot about the finite game versus the infinite game. And for me, pace management is how we play the infinite game in a sustainable way and don't burn ourselves out in the pursuit of like intensity and the intensity of chasing those very, very specific goals. So I'd say that piece for me really speaks to nervous system regulation.
I think what I love about what you just said is how structure is incredibly useful to create space to then play within it. And without that structure, it's difficult to then have the reduction in pace because you're not controlling where you're pushing and where you're pulling. It's the same as this concept of good stress that we spoke about with Dr. E, right? There are times where we do want to stress the system for an adaptation, for a response. Going into exercise, going into different therapies is creating good stress and then coming back into a more balanced way of things. So to go into more detail on what you just said, for me, it's about being more intentional around time for work, time for play, time for rest. And that looks like management of a calendar that creates structure around those things. And there's always going to be a little bit of bleed on the edges, but whereas I think there was a time where I would feel guilty if I wasn't working 12 hours a day because somebody else was.
Yeah.
There's a lot of comparison, right? Versus I know now that actually if I block an hour to train and 30 minutes for mobility and then an hour and a half for work, the output in the hour and a half of work is going to be so much better than if I just went at it for 3 hours without getting my exercise in, getting my mobility in. It's almost like priming for the work period. So more intentionality around how I use my time to then create freedom within that time to be my best.
I think it's such an interesting point, and I catch myself sometimes in these conversations going like, I feel like I'm being a bit wishy-washy, a bit airy-fairy around like not giving people specific protocols to follow. But I think actually Dr. E touched on this as well, and I know it's a shared view for us. It's actually, I'm not here to give anyone a protocol to follow, like actually externalizing what works for you and putting my routines and my habits into your life might not work in the same way it's worked for me. So actually that intentional trial and error to an extent, awareness, self-awareness, both through self-inquiry, talk therapy, which has been a massive part of my journey, getting to know yourself, and then, as you touched on there, like lifestyle design based on that. It's like design your environment, it's design your space, it's where you live, it's how you live, it's nutrition, it's all of these factors that now are very well documented, going, what works for me? And actually creating that very specific and intentional life that facilitates, again, your health and your happiness, rather than trying to like squeeze yourself in somebody else's box and routines and expecting it to work.
For sure. I think I do still feel there is a benefit to hearing what works for people, but layered with the perspective that I actually have to test these things for myself. And that requires a degree of introspection to actually ask yourself, would this work for me? Can I make space to try this? And through trial and error is how I've come across the things that now work for me. So, you know, you mentioned breath work, you mentioned meditation. That's a daily practice for me because it works. It's almost now become popular to like poo-poo that and say, not everyone needs to meditate, not everyone needs breath work. Fine, I'm sure they don't. For me, it's been really impactful and I use it on a daily basis. And I will use it until such a time as it doesn't work or I find something else that serves me better. Time blocking we just spoke about. I think probably another piece of low-hanging fruit that I found really helpful, and that is a daily practice, is now a weekly practice in the form of more longer dedicated time too, is journaling, is writing. It literally feels like I'm pouring out what I'm holding in my head onto a page, and I found that to be really effective. I've tried talk therapy, and I don't find it particularly effective for me, right? I know there's people that get a lot from it, but for me, I don't find that that's effective for me. Journaling, however, amazing. I can take my time, I can get it out. I'm doing it in public in a way with the Long Lane project and writing about that. And that practice, doing that in public, has been really helpful because as I'm writing, I didn't realize I was feeling a bit stressed or a bit unsure about that. And then there's another layer to it because of I'm having the willingness to put it out there and I must be like, that's there. Yeah,
it's interesting, you know, for me, talk therapy, I know, and this is something I learned through my last relationship, also something I've learned through my work, is I'm I heard this amazing thing. It's like I think we mentioned this on the Africa episode as well, the difference between talk to think and think to talk. You know, someone who's a think to talk person will do a lot of processing internally and then say what is close to the finished product. For me, I'm the other way around. I talk to formulate what I think on something. And so I'm like working through it real time, collaboratively. And that's why for me, therapy is a great process because I'm resolving stuff in real time through the conversation. And so I think, again, it comes back to understanding what works for you. And one thing that I think is like an underlying theme, and it's interesting because we're going to go on to talk about, you know, be it peptides, supplements, and things that we are adding in, both of us, to our lives. But I think actually there is a really healing effect to stripping things back, and less is more, like subtraction rather than addition. I've been thinking so much about this recently because the wellness world is and has been for a very long time, being just pushing more. It's like, just add this in. Oh, and add this in as well, and this and this and this. And it'd be very easy to sit here, and I think, it's part of the life cycle ultimately, but you sit here and you say, oh, well, I'll just start with less. But actually, we both know that the journey to leaning into less necessitates going through adding in more, because that's how you realize what works. It's like, throw all of the shit at the wall, see what sticks, take the stuff away that doesn't and keep the stuff that does. And then there's a peacefulness that comes, like a liberation almost, that comes with actually being like, I know what works for me. I don't need any more. I don't need to add noise to this because I've got my toolkit. And I think that's part of that like necessary life cycle of figuring that out, is adding in things, but it's not just adding them in for the sake of it.
Do you feel there's a seasonality to it? Because like, I feel like at certain seasons and phases of life, I'm seeking different things. Like at the moment, because my life is quite busy in respect of work, outside of that, what I'm seeking is peace and a slowing down. And therefore the decisions that I make are the things to include in my day to day, because I can't do everything. None of us can do everything every day. We can't go through every single protocol every single day. It's just not enough time, and it just wouldn't be, it just wouldn't be doable. So because at this stage in my life, I'm seeking to simultaneously optimize my energy and attention at work and my peace and I guess slowing down outside of work, the things that I'm choosing to keep in my day to day are, we mentioned breathwork, meditation, journaling, but I'm finding that what really helps my sleep at the moment is reading fiction before bed.
Yeah.
And when I say fiction, I really struggle at the minute with nonfiction.
Yeah, same.
And I used to read a lot of nonfiction, I'm eager to learn, eager to, take on board information. Now I get 3 or 4 pages in, I'm bored, no matter what it is. I do better when it's audio. So like on the tube or going to work, I can do podcast, I can do audiobook. But at night in particular, 30 minutes fiction before bed really helps me downregulate, really helps me sleep well. And so I'm leaning into that a lot.
Yeah.
I'm also trying to walk a lot more and leave more time. I used to be really bad at doing everything back to back.
Yeah.
And then very often a meeting would overrun, it would bleed into the next one, it would bleed into the next one. This would create this stress response because I don't want to let people down. So what I find myself doing now is actually spending time, blocking time between meetings to get to the next meeting. Not a revolutionary idea by any means. And then using that time to walk so that I'm getting, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, like movement in, sometimes with a podcast, sometimes without, and just walking and listening. But that time being intentional around walking is where I'm, again, cultivating that feeling of peace, of quiet, of not rushing, and doing that on a regular basis is having an overall effect. So in respect to the question, seasonality. What seasonal phase that you're in.
Yeah, I think to your point, there's something that I've implemented recently, which is whether it's like a run, a workout, or a walk, that for me is actually time where I can't remember the last time I wore headphones or listened to something. Like that is, I actually want to be in my own head at that point. And I take that as a real positive, because there are times in my life where I definitely haven't wanted to be in my own head, and easier just to drown out the noise with something else. And that for me has been great, because it just frees up that brain space. That's where ideas come. The ideas aren't coming where you're sat there trying to come up with an idea, when you're sat at your desk doing sometimes meaningful, sometimes meaningless shit. It's actually like creating that dedicated space to have those ideas and that space and that quiet time, for artists, but for creatives in any form, being bored, actually having that dead time. That's where it comes through. Seasonality, absolutely. The way that I've always thought about this, or not always, but the last few years thought about this, is that what's important to me, it's probably health, social, work, and I put training maybe separate to health. It's very closely linked, but you could put your life into these different buckets. You have 100 credits to spend across all of those. You can't get more credits. You're not going to get less credits. But if you turn up the dial on X, you have to turn down the dial on Y. Otherwise, you're going to burn out. And so that for me has always been how I viewed it. And right now, similarly, I'm not consuming a lot of non-fiction content. Kind of that side of things isn't really something that's high for me right now. The last couple of weeks, training has been probably less than it has been for the last, I've circumstantially moved house. There's been a few things going on, so it's naturally faded away. But I've actually been seeing more of my mates. I've been socializing more. There's been aspects that have been really positive, and work's been dialed up. And so it's just, playing with those levers and understanding that there'll be times where you want to turn this one up, or maybe this one turns down naturally, but always understanding that relationship and that dynamic, so that I go, right, I'm thinking about, as we go into the summer, I really want to turn up my training. Like, it's something I'm keen to do. I'm back into yoga in quite a big way at the moment. Trying to aim for 3 yoga classes a week, 4 jiu-jitsu, and 3 strength sessions. That's more sessions than there are days in the week. So how's that working? And the energetic output of that won't be going elsewhere. And it might be that I choose intentionally again that social might turn down, or even work might slow down a little bit, but being okay with that. And I think this life design piece is so empowering and powerful. But yeah, seasonally, I think for me right now, work, performance, and social are all on a fairly even footing.
I really like your credit system, and it's how I'm starting to think about performance. Up until recently, all of my sessions, most of my sessions were hard sessions. And as I age, at my ripe age of 35,
40, depending which test you ask,
I recognize the importance of prioritizing mobility, flexibility, recovery, and giving it those as much time as I do my actual training.
Yeah.
And I've been doing a lot of reformer, actually, and reformer Pilates has been a game changer. And I've recognized where I'm maybe a bit imbalanced, where maybe my core strength isn't as good as it should be, where I'm maybe not as flexible, and it's helping to support those elements. And I include that as an element of recovery, right? And then being more conscious of how the time I give to stretching. Before I would go on a 20K run, and I do like 3 minutes of foam rolling and then carry on my day. And if I want to continue to run how I'm running, that just isn't sustainable long term. So it's giving recovery the same attention and focus and prioritization as I do the training, to allow me to do more of the training. And I think that's something that you don't really appreciate until you start to get a little bit older, how important that is.
Yeah, I can imagine what that's like for you.
But my goal is, like, what I've also probably realized is that despite being 35, I'm running my fastest times I've ever ran.
Yeah.
I'm running for longer than I've ever ran. Actually, my performance is improving. And I think it's because I'm doing more of the recovery,
for sure.
Both in terms of physical recovery, reformer, injury prevention, other things. Also in terms of, dialing in the nutrition, focus on supplementing areas where perhaps potentially there's a challenge, more rest, more recovery, less alcohol, less late nights. Like, it's all like a multitude of things that all kind of feed in.
Yeah. So let's talk maybe towards the higher tech, higher spec end of things, where we're, to use the terminology that we're using with Dr. E, kind of revving the engine. I think the caveat that I want to put on this, that hopefully has been implicit through both the conversations, is that for me, for example, I've only just started exploring things like NAD+. I'm exploring maybe starting peptides soon, some of this supplementation and extra support, these jet packs, as Dr. E said. The reason that I'm only really coming to this now is because up until probably the last it's been a journey over the last sort of 6-7 years, but it has been laying those foundations. It's been optimizing my sleep. It's been optimizing my training. It's been nutrition's been a big, long journey for me. And I had my bloods done as part of the process with Human and Dr. E. And I was expecting something to be out of whack. I was like, I've not had my bloods done for a while. Been quite a stressful start to the year. My nutrition's been a bit up and down. And my results were really reassuring and really positive. And so now I go, okay, I feel good. I'm in a good place. The data shows me that. and I love being a kind of self guinea pig. I'll be like, if it's safe and if there could be benefit, then I'm open to it, and I'm open to trying it just to see what I'm capable of and what I might be able to do. So I know you are probably a little bit further down that road, but what have been some of your experiences with things like peptides, with NAD, with certain supplementation?
So let's start with the physical.
Yeah.
So about 2 years ago, I started to realize that my skin was aging quickly. And to caveat this, I was living in Dubai. I was in direct sunlight every day. And I started to catch myself in the mirror, be like, wow, like I've got red marks. So I've got getting more lines. My skin doesn't look so good. Now, I wasn't wearing SPF. I wasn't doing any kind of skincare routine. And it did knock my confidence. I'm like, I've always looked around my age or younger. Certainly when I was younger, I looked younger than I was. And I went to see Dr. E. We did a skin imaging camera, and it showed significant sun damage, right? I'm very white, clearly, and not designed for the heat of Dubai, but not wearing SPF, obviously it damaged my skin. So I've invested a lot of time improving my skin. So I've been doing microneedling. Shout out Becca. Becca's been doing microneedling, which essentially is creating the condition for the skin to repair itself through increased collagen, putting small needles into the skin to help repair. And then on top of that, I have been wearing SPF. I have been using a morning and an evening routine with different products. And I've been really focusing on that, and it's working really, really well. So paying attention to skin health, gut health connected to skin health as well. I had a gut barrier test a year ago, and it showed I had some leaky gut. That was from overtraining. And then correcting that using a supplement protocol and with Dr. E has also had a positive impact. So from the physical perspective, I'm now really dialed in on maintaining a proactive approach to skin health, which I think is important to pay attention to as we age. Skin's our biggest organ. So that microneedling has been a game changer for me, and then the day-to-day stuff. In terms of the performance stuff, on top of that, red light, I would say as well.
100%.
Red light is a game changer. And if you're looking for something that's really research backed, so many studies on red light to boost mitochondrial function. It's the powerhouse of the cell, really, really important. And it's 5-10 minutes a day, every day without fail. In terms of performance boosting, I was going for a stage earlier this year, later last year, where I was running probably 120 to 150 kilometers a week at the highest. Obviously, it's a lot of impact on joints, tendons, muscles, etc. I did a peptide course, BP157 stacked with CJC. CJC is the growth hormone precursor, BPC, meaning body protection compound. I did not get injured, and I was running 5 days a week, lifting 4 days a week, doing a lot of output. So I really felt like that was beneficial for my performance. I made a really, really positive speed gain during that time as well. And then just day-to-day stuff that I'm taking supplements based on my blood results. So there was a few things to boost, nothing that was out of range, but things that I could improve. And then probably if I could take one supplement, just one, Shilajit.
Why?
Shilajit. It's one of the few things that I take where I notice if I take it or I don't. And I just get this energy boost. It's real energy boost. I genuinely feel that I carry it around with me. I would also say, I think for a lot of people, not eating enough fruits and vegetables, a good quality greens powder is important. And if you're not eating enough fruit, vitamin C is something the body doesn't hold on to particularly well. So like camu powder or a high dose vitamin C can be really, really important. And if you want to go more high tech, I have a protocol around travel. I travel a lot. I fly at least a couple of times a month. This month, I think I'm 6 flights this month. I will go and do a super nutrient IV, NAD, IV. I'll do hyperbaric oxygen after as well. And one of the things I love doing 3 or 4 times a year is ozone therapy. So that's essentially taking blood, spinning it, filtering the blood, putting it back in. the reason I know that works is, one, it's the energy boost. But two, the whites of my eyes go like insanely white afterwards, which is obviously a positive sign. So we're talking about revving the engine. We're talking about these additional therapies. I would say that they're some of my favorites.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I think, just starting to dip my toe in the water with it. I started NAD subcutaneous month or two ago. I just finished my first kind of round of that and really noticed the difference from an energy perspective, like tangible, like felt sense of energy that I was, I come to this stuff semi-skeptical. I'm like, we'll see. Yeah. Shilajit, I've just stopped taking actually based on my blood panel. That's not a brag, but they said I don't need it from a tea perspective. But I do think there are other benefits to it from like a trace minerals and an overall perspective. So I'd probably bring it back in at some point. So the other one that I know is a big one now for everyone talking about it is creatine. For me, I'm every other day, about 5 grams. I think 5 grams of creatine. And that primarily for recovery and performance from an exercise and perspective, but also there's more and more evidence coming out around cognitive function as well for creatine, both in men and women. I think there's often this misconception, women worried about getting bulky and jacked. It's like, we've both been trying to get jacked for about 20, 25 years. So if it were that easy, just taking some creatine, then we'd probably be a lot more jacked than we are. So
speak for yourself.
But yeah, creatine's a big one for me. That's a staple. And then I've recently started taking collagen supplement as well, from like a skin hair perspective. And then I'm trying to think what else kind of.
Let's touch on toxic burden.
Yeah,
because this is a big theme at the moment. I think I've shared before that a couple of years ago I did a test and it showed that I had high levels of mold, parasites, heavy metals, and I did a lot of work to resolve that. I think I'm way more cognizant of my environment now than I've ever been. So this is thinking about air quality in the home, chemicals that are used in the home, water, materials. So there's a process of transitioning, right? So thinking about your bed sheets, thinking about the towels, thinking about what's in your shower, what's in your cosmetics cupboard, what clothing are you wearing, right? And it's not to say that I'm perfect, but being more cognizant of that and making better informed choices. And then also looking at the daily habits that stack, right? Am I drinking out of plastic water bottles, or am I taking a glass bottle from home that I've spring water that I filtered, as a small example? And then putting in protocols through the year that support that that toxicity level. So, doing a parasite cleanse twice a year, or as and when I feel I need it. Doing a liver detox, doing periods of fasting, and just being intuitive with the body to know what's working and what isn't. But dedicating time to these detoxification periods, particularly around, where I've spent time in maybe environments that are not supporting a holistic level of health. And to take it all the way back to a more basic one, just spending more time in nature, spending more time with friends. Coming back to your credits thing, I did a bit of a self-analysis last month, and it was, I don't really hang out with anyone. Like, I'm doing a lot of work at the moment because of where that project is. I'm doing a lot of performance stuff very often to balance that time in work, but I don't really hang out with anyone other than Jamie.
You hang out with me and Harrison,
basically,
and Dr. E.
That's about it. That's about it.
And Tom.
So I think just, being aware that, and we spoke about this with the Brian Johnson piece around like being so focused on health and performance that we neglect the social. But social being such an important contributing factor to emotional well-being. And so I did a little bit of a journal exercise on this, which I think I shared with you, which is looking at the summer, right? And we see these things on social media sometimes. You've only got 40 summers left, as an example. But it's a good perspective to say, well, I want to have a great summer. And there's commitments that I need to maintain around work and family and everything else. But let me list out all the things that I love doing. And let me then put next to them the next time I will do that thing this summer. what are the trips that I'd love to go on this summer? Who would I love to hang out with this summer? And then being really intentional about putting together a bit of a plan for the summer. Again, comes back to the structure that we spoke about at the start, so that within those plans, I can have that play, that space. And I think having done that, like you and I have got a trip coming up in a couple of weeks. You're when you're intentional, you have those things booked in. It means that you can then go away and get involved in the work and everything, knowing that you've got these things in there to act as a balance.
This is a topic I really love, because I always say to people, wearing my Whoop at the moment and sort of looking at my HRV and trying to reverse engineer, like, what moves the dial. And I'll wake up like a random Sunday morning and it'll have doubled. I'm like, what did I do yesterday? Did I train? Did I do more breath work? Did I do an ice bath? No, I spent the day with my mates. It's like, it's fascinating to see actually the impact of things that we take for granted. Like proper rest, guilt-free rest, seeing your family, seeing your friends, the stuff that we've kind of lost touch with in this very individualistic world. And it reminded me, actually, shouting out Jamie Will again, but he first introduced me to this concept of hedonic calendaring, referring to like hedonism, pleasure. And he basically works it on a day, week, month, year basis. And it's, what is your hedonic calendar? What are the things that bring you joy and pleasure every single day? That are the small things. What's a bigger, slightly bigger thing that's a weekly thing? What is your monthly thing? That could be a trip away. That could be, a live gig, or whatever your things are. And then what's your annual? Like, what's the big one? What's, is it a festival? Is it, a longer trip? Is it, last year I did a trip with Jamie and his team to Utah off grid for 6 days. And that was like my big kind of stake in the ground moment for the year. And it's actually a really amazing exercise to do, because you just work it back and you go, I'm going to commit to that. And things have changed, things move around, the credits get allocated to work a little bit more, social a little bit more. But yeah, I really noticed, I saw some of the videos, some of our lot were at Chantrasiba last night. I actually came back from jiu-jitsu, came out of the station and I didn't realize it was in Islington. And I came out of Highbury in Islington. I saw loads of people. I was like, they look like they've been to Chantrasiba. I messaged a couple of my friends who were there and I ended up bumping into them. And it was such a nice moment of like just pure connection. And that's, for me, like, live music is such a big thing, and just things that like draw you and pull you into presence, that are just for the experience and just for that thing, rather than it being, it's great that for us, we've got a life where this is work and it's hanging out with your mate, chatting to your mate. We train together. We'll, talk about Long Lane. We'll go visit the site, and that is time with your friends still. But to have it that is unrelated to work, that is purely just, for the experience, I think is the highest form of that, that highest good, that highest leisure experience, for sure.
I'm thinking a lot as well at the moment about also being intentional around challenge. And I'll give you a very transparent look into my mind around how I'm thinking about running at the moment. So I've got this marathon coming up this weekend, right? And I fell out of love with running a little bit earlier this year, because it was all about the times. Can I beat this time? Can I do this? And I lost the enjoyment for the running. And I've had to kind of shift my perspective. I ran a half marathon a few weeks ago. I was about 4 minutes off my PB. And it made me think, maybe for the marathon I've got coming up, I should actually enter the half marathon instead, because I won't hit the target time that I want to hit. Right? I've got in my head, I have to run a sub-3 marathon in my first competitive marathon.
Yeah.
Don't know why. Is my ego there? Like, it has to be under 3 hours, have to do this. And then I kind of thought to myself, when was the last time I took something on knowing that I could fail? And am I just playing it safe? Oh, okay, I'll enter a half because I know I can do that in a good time. Yeah, I'm basically avoiding the possibility of failure. So I'm going to do the marathon, and I'm going to try and run it in under 3 hours, and I'm going to be willing to fail. And in the process, I'm still going to hold on to the enjoyment of doing it, regardless of the outcome. And it connects me back to the conversation with Johnny around intention versus expectation. So being able to take on something with an intention and being comfortable in the fact that I may not meet the target, and still having enjoyment in the process. And so I then kind of thought, okay, can I continuously show up and take on things where the likelihood of me not meeting the intention is high, and still enjoy it and still be there? But the point is that there's a high chance I'll fail.
Yeah.
And I think most of us elect to do things where there's a high chance of success.
Yeah.
Right?
It's this misconception, right, that we only learn is lessons nobody wants to learn, and we only learn through the experience, where we're still convinced, even though we have so much evidence that hitting that goal doesn't give us the everlasting fulfillment that we think we will get. We've got so much evidence that isn't the case, because the goalpost just moves again.
Sure.
It's temporary, it's fleeting. And yet we still convince ourselves that that's what we should be aiming for. It's like, oh, when I just achieved that thing. And you ask the question, okay, but you said that last time and you achieved the thing and you still didn't feel as good as you thought you were going to. And it's like, if the world had lived up to its promise of eternal fulfillment from achieving a goal, then we'd all be done. We'd all have completed it. And I think it's that shift again to like the infinite game, where it's like, if you're not enjoying the thing, you're missing the point.
For sure.
Yeah.
And even like, even with these protocols we're talking about, I enjoy doing them. Like when I wake up, I'm like, I get to do 10 minutes of breath work as the second or third thing I do in the day, and just to lay there and be in that moment, and the joy and the physical feeling and the mental space that I get from that is like, what a privilege to be able to lay there and do that in a home that's warm, that's safe, in a nice neighborhood. Like, what a privilege that is. I was listening to something earlier, and it talks about the compounding effect of success and the compounding effect of let's say failure, in whatever context you want to give that, and how the more we tap into that energy, the more it seems to extrapolate out and be there. And I think this is so true of teeing up our day in this way and taking control of the inputs. And so that's why starting a day like that for me does bleed into everything else I do. Because I sit here after this conversation with Dr. E, and because I had a degree of introspection this morning around my experience, I can sit there after the podcast and just for a minute think, God, I really enjoyed that conversation. And I'm really feel really fortunate I get to be here and have these kind of chats. And then we get to have a chat and I think, God, I really enjoyed that conversation. And then because I've been intentional about setting that up, I have the space within that to then play and be appreciative of it.
And this is the pace management thing again, and maybe we'll close here. And it's just around, I know the difference in trajectory of my day if I wake up, get out of bed, shower, grab my stuff, leave, versus having the luxury for a lot of people of actually waking up, going and sitting on my mat and my meditation cushion, doing my practice, slowing things down, like starting from that place of intentionality versus starting from a place of autopilot. And I think, I mentioned there, it's a bit of a luxury, and I'm sure we all have different circumstances, but you can, for the most part, create 10, 15 minutes.
Can we lean into that for a second?
Yeah, go for it.
Finish. So I want to put myself in the position, because again, I'm hearing people, I'm hearing me at maybe 19, 20 say, well, it's all right for you because that's where you're at. And that's, but there are people that are rushing around. They wake up, they're rushing to a job they don't particularly like. They've got money pressures, they've got family pressures. They're knackered when they finish work. They haven't got the energy to go to the gym. They go home, and just to create a bit of headspace, they watch the thing on TV, they eat the fast dinner, and they go to bed. When we're in that cycle, I know we hear, well, if you think positively and you think with gratitude, then good things are. It's really, really challenging for people to break out of that.
Yeah.
Has there been a moment where you've been in that position?
Yeah.
And how did you break out of it?
Yeah. And I think this is where the manifestation movement falls short, right? It's like, it's all well and good if you are of a level of wealth, of a level of status, of a level of, let's call it middle class. Manifestation all of a sudden seems more accessible because you've got the stability, you've got a roof over your head.
Sure.
You've got a lifestyle that facilitates you to go, I'm going to aim for this big, high, lofty thing. I feel fortunate for my upbringing, my lifestyle that's led me to the point that I am now. And there's been a lot of hard work within that as well. But I think the difference that I look at my life before the age of 24 versus my life now is that in that very shift from autopilot. of literally just thinking, this is just how I am. This is just how things are. It's an energy of being passive, being a passenger, to one of being an active, engaged participant in my own life. And then we can get into the whole rabbit hole of, predetermined paths and fate and destinies and all of that stuff. But, surrender and trust is only as powerful as your ability to actively engage and participate in the flow of things. And so, again, it sounds a little bit woo-woo, a little bit wishy-washy. So more tangibly, I think the shift has to be awareness of what you are doing and where you are living life on autopilot. You have to bring awareness to that. Then in those moments where it feels easier because you're tired, because you're knackered, because you're struggling to reach for the easy, the short term, the easy, simple gratification of scrolling, of watching TV, of, these things that all have a place and are part of our lives, but can't lead our lives. And making one choice to do something differently one time. And it's, can I say this to my clients all the time, can I not just scroll in between my meetings? Can I breathe? Can I sit still? Can I slow down? Or maybe I don't watch TV, maybe I read 10 pages of that book. Simple things, but they're cliches for a reason. They're cliches because they work. And everyone, you can roll your eyes as much as you like at the simple stuff, but the people who have done it, I look at people that I admire and I still roll my eyes sometimes because I'm like, they make it sound so simple. But that's because they've been there and done it. They've been through the process of doing it, and now they can look back and go, if you actually do that thing, it does work. And you only know that if you start.
It's a good place to end.
Let's finish it there. Guys, thank you as always for joining us. We would love to hear, as we go into this next phase of the podcast, anything you want to hear us talk about, any people you want to hear us talk to. So please do reach out, comment, like, subscribe. It's been a pleasure to have you as always, and we'll see you again next time.